Hello, hello! Welcome to this special one-off episode. Why a one-off episode? Because I had some extra time to make videos a few weeks back and decided to make an extra one. And I'm currently 6 videos ahead on the weekly release schedule, so I've got some time. But why this video in particular? I love Blue Mages. It is my favorite Final Fantasy class, and has been since I played the fan translation of Final Fantasy V when I was but a wee child. I mean, years ago I made a homebrew Blue Mage class for D&D 5th edition. It wasn't good, or balanced, or even that fun, but I do enjoy the idea of Blue Mages. But there aren't really many Final Fantasy games with Blue Mages as an option. In main numbered Final Fantasies, it's really just Final Fantasy X-2 with Gun Mage, and while Blue Mage does show up in some side games, most notably in the Tactics Advance series, those are kind of a different thing, and I refuse to not do a run of Final Fantasy V with Blue Mages, so here I am, doing exactly that. Preamble out of the way, we have reached the Wind Shrine where we will get our first classes. And eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that there are no cutscenes playing. That's right, I finally found the cutscene remover for Final Fantasy V. It definitely was not in an easily findable Steam community page detailing exactly how to install mods for all of the Pixel remasters. Cough. Anyway, we have our class for the run, so we make everyone a Blue Mage, and it's time to get set up. For those who don't know, the central gimmick of Blue Magic is its unique spells, used by enemies, that your character can learn through the Learning ability. And Blue Mages have a comically large variety of spells that they can call on. First, we pop over to Tool to get a key, and pop into the Beginner House to grab some free items and learn our first spell, Goblin Punch. This deals the same damage as a basic attack, but ignores the row the character is in, and if the caster and target are of the same level, it deals a bunch of damage. Then it's to the shops to buy some equipment. Blue Mages can equip light armor, rods, daggers, and swords. And shields, which is huge. Then back to the Pirate Cave to pick up Vampire, which deals damage to one enemy, equal to half the amount of HP the caster has lost and then heals the caster the same amount. It's not great, but it will outstrip potions for the beginning portions of the game. Then back to the Wind Shrine to get Arrow from Moldwind, which is just the basic damage spell of Blue Mages. About as strong as Fire or Thunder, though weaker in practice due to the Blue Mage's lower intelligence, and we'll pick up upgrades to it later. Initial spells acquired, we head into the canal and fight our second boss. Arrow deals more damage than physical attacks, but sword attacks are good enough, and when Carlobos gets my HP low, I just use a potion or Vampire to heal the character back up. It's the first post-job fight, and it's never that interesting. Through the ship graveyard, we reach Siren. While in living form, I can just attack for okay damage. Siren does have the ability to cast Silence, which I can't cure, so that's not great for my mages, but not the end of the world. In undead form, I can lean on Arrow, which actually deals more damage. The fight ends pretty quickly, despite Bartz and Galuf both going down. Into Carwyn to start buying some new equipment. I also pick up the Frost Rod that is here, and if you were hoping to see me not spam elemental rods again, well, to the mountain. Give an ether to this tombstone so it can use Flash, another blue magic that attempts to blind all enemies. And it's time for the next boss. Immediately cure poison and start using Goblin Punch. Because our level matches both enemies, it deals 20 times damage and ends this fight very quickly. Onwards! The basement of Castle Waltz has an elven cloak to increase evasion, then to the tower to get Frog Song from this elf toad. This inflicts, or cures, toad on one target. Not especially useful since Maiden's Kisses exist, but hey, Frog Song doesn't cost money. Then Waltz Tower and our next boss, Garula. I try using Goblin Punch, but I misread the monster level, so it just deals normal damage. But Garula is vulnerable to Toad. It will immediately cast Toad on itself, but it has a limited amount of MP. Once it runs out, it stays as a Toad, and I can safely attack until it dies, unaffected by its normally devastating counterattacks. And we can meteor hop over to Karnak. First, we learn Question, which deals damage to an enemy equal to the difference in the caster's maximum and current HP. Then to Karnak, where I can finally buy more of the elemental rods. I will be using these quite extensively. Into the fire ship, and we face the liquid flame. One ice rod isn't enough to bring it down, and I just don't have enough offensive or healing power to survive. Back to Karnak to buy another ice rod. By equipping one on a character and using the other, I can benefit from the damage boost, and a single rod is enough to take out the liquid flame. I'd love to run around picking up items in the burning castle, but unfortunately I don't really have the damage I would need to kill the random encounters fast enough for it to be worth it. I do learn Era in the first encounter, but then I just bail, and use another rod to skip the final fight. I'll get the Deathclaw spell later. Next, a slight variation on the rules. Because not all Blue Mage spells can actually be learned through normal play, for some you have to control the enemy using the Beastmaster's control ability, which is a different class. However, since Blue Magic is the fundamental mechanic I'm trying to take advantage of, I will be leveling up Bartz enough to get control and using control, but only in specific circumstances where it is needed to learn Blue Magic. Okay? Well, tough. I'm doing it anyway. And our next effort is going to be getting Aqua Breath. This is a very strong spell that can only be learned from the Dorm Chimera. But it's strong enough to kill my entire party in a single cast. Fortunately, I can kill it with a single Ice Rod, so once I've gotten a level enough to survive, I can just kill it and learn the spell. Because it gives great EXP and a BP, it's also a great place to learn Control on Bartz. Now that I have Control, I can head back into the fire ship and control a Motor Trap to learn Missile, which deals damage equal to 3/4 the target's current HP. Then control a Mithril Dragon outside the Ancient Library, which kills the caster and fully restores the HP and MP of a target. Time for the Ancient Library, which has several new spells to learn. First, I grab Moon Flute from page 256, mostly by accident as it berserks my entire party. Then level 5 Death, which requires making sure some, but not all, of my character levels are multiples of 5. And finally, Off Guard, which halves the target's defense, which ends up being kind of useless because Blue Mages have too low of a strength stat to really rely on physical attacks. Next is the fight against Ifrit. I try Off Guard, but my attacks still deal far less than just Aqua Breath. My party is getting their butts kicked though, so I toss another Ice Rod to finish the fight. There's some future Blue Magic spells that I'm really looking forward to having. Byblos is next, and I just chuck a fire rod at it, ending the fight immediately. I will stop just throwing rods at enemies, soon-ish, but not quite yet. And it's into the desert to face a sandworm. Era deals okay damage here, and when my HP gets low, I can use Vampire rather than potions to heal. This fight is very slow going, but I'm never really in any danger. Now we have an airship, but first, a boss fight. It has Tail Screw to reduce HP to single digits, and appears to be difficult to hit with Vampire. Real bummer. Instead, just spam Era to deal as much damage as I can, while healing with the drastically inferior potions. Not an interesting fight, but it goes down. More Blue Magic time. I grab Darkspark from the Black Flame enemies on Crescent Island. This halves the target's level, generally reducing enemy damage, and potentially making them vulnerable to level multiple Blue Magic. Time to grab Adamantite so we can fly up to the Sky Fortress. The Adamantoise itself is vulnerable to level 5 Death, which is hilarious. Time to assault the Flying Fortress. Immediately learn Flamethrower from the flamethrowers. Fighting these enemies takes a lot of HP, so I keep having to rest between each fight because I just do not have any real healing options. Big Boss Cannon time! Aqua Breath takes out both secondary parts very, very quickly, then Off Guard and Coral Sword attacks deal very good single target damage. It fires the cannon, but only takes out about half my HP. I do not heal, and the second fire takes out the rest of my HP. That's embarrassing. Second attempt goes the same way, except this time I use Vampire after the cannon hits to ensure my characters all have over half HP. I then alternate physical attacks and Vampire for the rest of the fight until the Soul Cannon breaks. Into the Flying Fortress, and it's time to get some goodies. Enchanted Fan gets controlled and gives me White Wind. This restores the entire party's health equal to the health of the caster. It's the only healing spell we will get, and the only one we will need. Then control the Lamia to get 1000 needles, which always deals exactly 1000 damage. This will tail off by the end of the game, but for now it is the most damage I can do with any attack or spell. Those who have seen the Black Mage only run I did may recall that the Archaeoavis has a whole elemental barrier change thing, except 1000 needles deals 1000 damage. Always. So I just spam 1000 needles, using White Wind to keep healed up as required. After the pain this boss caused in Black Mages only, it is so nice to see it crumple so easily. Time for a boss rush to get to Galuf's world. Spam Aqua Breath at Parobolus so they all die at once, negating their Arise magic. Then Titan, who goes down to 3000 needles. His Earthshaker final move deals a lot of damage, but no one even dies. And finally, the Chimera Brain, which deals heavy damage, but goes down to 4000 needles, with some White Wind to keep my HP up. We're in Galuf's world, and we've been captured. Galuf must go toe-to-toe with Greg, which is very easy because 1000 needles exist, and 2000 needles is enough to reunite the party. Time for a bridge fight. The lesser fights are not interesting, but then we have another Greg fight. 4000 needles gets him to his buffing phase. 3000 more sees him fleeing. I love this idea of tracking how many 1000 needles it takes for these mid-game bosses. It's very funny to me. We've been scattered away, and time to buy more items at our next town. It's a long walk to the forest, a sliding ride through a water cave, and our next boss, Tyrannosaur. We don't have any great way to deal fire damage, but chuck a phoenix down, and it dies. Back to Castle Ball, and immediately leave to climb a mountain. Nothing of note on the mountain, and we're into the boss, which, just like in Black Mages only, cannot do anything if you just destroy its plants with multi-target magic. I alternate between Aqua Breath and 1000 needles, and it dies very quickly. On my way off the mountain, I learn Magic Hammer, which reduces a target's MP. Time for a boat fight, and another fight with Greg. Greg is vulnerable to Dark Spark, which halves his level, and he can then be targeted with level 5 death. The easiest this fight has ever been. Take the submarine that exists into Barrier Tower. Immediately learn Time Slip, which inflicts sleep and old on the target, both very nice to have. I then spend a bit of time trying to learn level 3 Flare. Unfortunately, I cannot, as I have no way to cast Reflect on the Red Dragon. There are some very weird ways to do that at this point, but it looks like level 3 Flare will have to wait. And then the boss, Atomos. It is vulnerable to Time Slip, so I can then just safely burn it down with many, many needles. And our next destination is Guido's Cave. Here we can find the Metamorph enemy, of which there are apparently 3 varieties, only one of which is helpful to me. Once I learn that, I can wait for it to become an enchanted fan, and learn Eroga. This is going to be my best damaging spell for most of the rest of the game. On the way to the Great Forest, we stop into the next town and pick up some new armor and the all-important Air Knife. These work like the elemental rods, increasing damage from wind elemental spells by 50%. Considering wind is our best spell, these will stay equipped for the rest of the game. And in the Great Forest, we learn Lilliputian Lyric, which lets us both cure and inflict Mini, possibly one of the funnier status effects in Final Fantasy. Crystal Fight time! These required a lot of finagling in Black Mages only because of their varying elemental weaknesses. They are, however, weak to Missile, reducing their HP to 1/4. And while in that last segment they do unleash strong elemental attacks, 2000 needles can easily finish them off. And Flash negates their physical attacks at high HP, so I can take this fight casually at my leisure. We now have Kryl and it's Exdeath's Castle time. First fight is another Greg fight. His attacks aren't weak, and he does have a decent number of damaging and status-inflicting spells, but all his damage is single target, meaning White Wind can more than keep me healthy. I can also cure Toad and Minnie, and while Old reduces my level, therefore reducing my damage, 1000 needles doesn't care. even a little. The fight goes on for a bit, but Greg never stood a chance. Bye, Greg. See you later. Time for our bad boy, Exdeath. And unfortunately, there aren't really any shenanigans I can employ here. No nonsense status effects or cheeky level manipulation. And my first attempt sees my team half dead with one attack. Now I could level up, or, hear me out, what if I just spammed elemental rods and hope it kills him before he can devastate my party? Listen, if the game didn't want me to spam elemental rods, it should have stopped rewarding me for doing so. It did not. And my second attempt ends with the victory. Wow, I am so underleveled for this point in the game. Anyway, Ferris and Lena dip out to be princesses, so it's just Kryl and Bartz for a bit. And another boss, Antlion. It's vulnerable to time slip, so cast that, then Needles. Ferris is back, and we move on. I guess these gargoyles are a boss? They have 5,000 HP each. Needles, dead. We have reached the point where air knife boosted Erogas have started to outperform 1,000 Needles. But that's okay. We couldn't just keep needling forever. It's still useful if the enemy has high defenses, resists wind damage, or I need to deal a specific amount of damage. Time for our next boss, Melusine, who is vulnerable to time slip. Why are so many bosses in this game vulnerable to time slip? Also, why am I using Flamethrower? Surely 1,000 Needles would deal more damage. Maybe it's about MP efficiency? Anyway, Lena is back and we have our airship. Only thing left to do is the interdimensional rift, but first we have a bit of setup to complete. First, it's time for the Hidden Village. No new weapons, but we can buy new shields, helmets, and armor, all of which is the best that we will get in the game. Then to the sea north of Wulst to get Mighty Guard, a very expensive spell that applies Protect, Shell, and Float to the entire team. It's the only buff we get in the game, and the only one we will need. Then we pick up the Magus Rod and Assassin's Dagger. Neither is great for me, but at least the Magus Rod boosts all elemental damage. Time to do the Island Shrine. Not because I actually want to, but because it's required to access Fork Tower. And the boss of the area is Wendigo. Only one is real, and it counters any all-target attacks. Except it is also vulnerable to Time Slip, so actually it's nothing. Just use Time Slip on each one, and then spam Eroga. Now it's time for Fork Tower. The only thing I care about here is the Wonder Rod, an item I don't really end up using because there are easier ways to get level 3 Flare now than reflecting it off an enemy. Minotaur is pretty much the same as in Black Mages only, just spam elemental rods because I can't use magic, so all my blue mage spells are out of my reach. Good thing elemental rods deal such unreasonable damage. Also, since I haven't called it out yet, but having a shield equipped is amazing. I never realized how effective shields are in Final Fantasy V. Omniscient marks my first use of Mighty Guard, which does a lot to protect me from its powerful offensive spells. Which is to say, they don't one-shot me, which is all I need to have the time to spam Eroga repeatedly. Them dead, I head to the top of Istri Falls to grab the magic lamp, my favorite item, and it's time to hop into the rift. We aren't completing it quite yet, but we have some things we need to do here. First is level 2 Old from the level checker, does what it says on the tin, then Roulette and Self-Destruct. Roulette is useless to me, but Self-Destruct will be very important. Then get my levels just right, so 2 of my party have levels that are multiples of 3. Then wait until the level checker decides it's going to use level 3 Flare. Hits anyone with a level 3 multiple with Flare? Yes, please. I am still missing a few blue mage spells, but they shouldn't really matter. It's time for our big Rift boss rush. First up is Calofisteri. She casts Reflect on herself and then inflicts a variety of statuses. I try to go for Off Guard and Goblin Punch, but it doesn't really work. Fortunately, 1,000 Needles bypasses Reflect. So, Needles it is. Next is a panda, which is not a Biblos, and is immune to Missile. I assure you, I checked. Fortunately, I have Flamethrower and Flame Rods for damage and White Wind for healing. It would have been even faster if I hadn't wasted so much time. Azulmagia knows blue magic and can actually learn spells you cast at it, including Self-Destruct. Then Catastrophe, which immediately one-shot my entire party. I try again to the same result. Okay, it's fine. Time to level up a bit because level 27 is just too low. I take a brief side trip to Istri Falls for reasons I have no idea why I came here. More leveling in the Rift. And back to Catastrophe, who decides he's not going to open with Earthshaker this time, so I can use Mighty Guard to float. Catastrophe will cancel float with 100 Gs, but I can recast Mighty Guard until I manage to hit with Darkspark. Once I do, its level is a multiple of 5, and I cast level 5 Death. Then Halicarnassus, who also loves to use status effects. No real nonsense strats here, just spam Aroga with air knives. Halicarnassus can be a pain, but the trick is to just kill him as fast as possible. It gets spicy at one point, with my whole party toads or dead, but Aroga deals enough damage to bring him down before it becomes too difficult. Now it's time for Twintania. Just need to survive for the first portion of the fight, which is pretty easy with Mighty Guard and White Wind. Once it starts charging Giga Flare, level 5 Death. Oh neat, I learned Mind Blast in that fight. Didn't even notice. Time for the Greg fight. It's not a real fight though. Just have to do a decent chunk of damage and then he monologues for just so long. Yes, Greg, we can hang out later. Just please stop talking. I have things to do. And finally, it's time for Necropobe, who should be doable with blue mages? Except the Magic Lamp has decided Zantetsuken can't actually kill anything? Which is odd, since I know the barrier should be vulnerable to death? Very odd. No worries, just means I need to use 1,000 needles. The barrier nodes aren't too durable, and while they deal a lot of damage, I can interject a White Wind between their casts to ensure no one dies. Greg shows up to finish the job, and that is it. And all that remains is Exdeath. Mighty Guard to reduce physical and magical damage, and it's time to spam Flame Rods. This gets through the first phase with very little issue, other than Exdeath's penchant for inflicting statuses. Fortunately, I managed to take out his last 10,000 HP fast enough, so I never see his most dangerous spells. Once we get to phase 2, I use the Magic Lamp to deal damage to all targets, and get Zantetsuken to take out the rear section. I used the Magic Lamp a few more times to get Catobleepus to summon against the bottom section in the hope Petrification will land. It does not, which is kind of a bummer, but more importantly, I have accidentally cast Reflect with Carbuncle. This isn't a huge deal initially, as White Wind is not reflectable. However, Mighty Guard is, so 2 of Exdeath's segments get to have Protect and Shell as a treat. I consider resetting at this point, not because I'm actually worried about losing, but because it's going to take twice as long to burn him down. Ultimately though, I decide it's faster to just keep going. Kryl and Ferris both get inflicted with Old, causing their stats, and therefore damage, to keep getting worse. Eventually I just stop using Flame Rods with them because they just aren't dealing enough damage. I have no way to cure Old, and even if I did, that only stops the degradation of stats. It doesn't fix any stat loss that's already happened. Also, I would like to call out again that shields in this game are so very useful. I don't think I'd ever noticed, but it's a huge difference compared to the Black Mage run to have a lot of Exdeath's physical attacks just miss entirely. But, finally, after expending almost 50 Flame Rods, all but one section has died. I use 1,000 needles to try and finish off the final segment. This doesn't work, and it uses Meteor, which, thankfully, is very generous and doesn't take out any of my party, at least partly due to Mighty Guard. A few more attacks, and the fight is over. And that is Final Fantasy V with only blue mages. And this run was very fun, and I learned a lot about the status vulnerabilities of these bosses. Despite having beaten this game probably a dozen times, I never knew how many bosses could be affected by very good status effects. I will have to remember that for future runs where statuses are an option. And just, wow, blue magic is strong. The very beginning was a bit rough with the no healing I had, but once I got White Wind, things went very well. Then Mighty Guard at the end. I already knew it was a stupidly strong spell, but I did not realize it was that strong. So yeah, if you enjoyed that, please like the video, subscribe if you want to see more, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But regardless, have a lovely day, and a safe trip home.